The attack on Villa Rosa, the attack on the education ministry, the attack on the Hyatt Hotel, the Beledweyne bombing, recently the Mahas bombing, those get in the world media. It took months before the successful Somali security forces offensive against al-Shabaab got in the international media. And I was complaining about this. I was calling to my Africa media friends and saying, what's going on here? And finally, one journalist got a story out, and she's an old friend I've known for a long time. And then there were 4 or 5 others, international media, that began finally to talk about the good news of communities being freed from al-Shabaab violence and extortion. But it took a while to where they didn't wait at all before they reported these high-profile attacks. I may have gone off the subject. I'm not sure.
No, I think you're good.
But yes, there is an education, an American education issue here, and Americans who know Africa as a continent, Americans who know Somalia, are working on that. And I'd have to say that the ethnic Somali American community in Minneapolis, in Columbus, in Fargo, are doing more and more to acquaint their fellow Americans with Somalia's rise. One thing that I've encouraged the leaders of the ethnic Somali American community to do is to work on a national organization that would further the efforts of this important American community to correct the record and to teach their fellow Americans about the reality here. There isn't really a national organization right now. There tends to be local organizations.
Yes, I have a follow-up question on that, on what you said. That it seems that you indicated that the media has a responsibility on promoting positive perception of Africa, but also as ambassadors, as diplomats, you you have more influence than the media does. So do you take responsibility, like as an American ambassador, as an American diplomat who's long served the African continent, for not positively reporting back to the State Department, to your government, informing them of new realities that have emerged in Africa? It's not just the media, but it's also we sort of feel diplomats are are not doing what they're supposed to do, like at least enough of what they could.
Well, I will say yes and no to that. The primary responsibility for educating the American people about Somalia reality lies with my friends at Somalia's embassy. They tell Somalia's story, we tell America's story. But that said, I said primary, I didn't say it's none of our business at all. And we realize there's always resource issues. Yeah, we're aware of that. But I know that when I went to Minneapolis for Somalia Week, Ambassador Sharif Ali was there with me on stage and had a lot of media engagements trying to use that big event as a platform to tell Somalia's story. I have spoken to many audiences in the United States throughout my career, including since I've been here as ambassador to Somalia, and I've always made this point, that while there are some countries on the continent that are in crisis, there have been some countries that have been in crisis for a long time. South Sudan, another country I spend a lot of time in, is one of them that comes to mind. But there's also a lot of positive stories and countries that have made tremendous progress over the decades. I had dinner last night with Anita Kiki-Beho, the current leader of the United Nations in Somalia. She is from Ghana. And she and I were talking about my recollection of Ghana in the early 80s, that it was at its lowest point. People spent all their time just looking for anything to eat. The society had really collapsed. And over the last 40 years, they have made a stunning amount of progress across all of the economic and social indicators. That's not well known internationally. And they're not the only one. I cite Ghana because of a discussion I had last night with Kiki Gbeho. But you could cite a number of African countries around each region that has had that sort of success. Frankly, Somalia has made progress towards regaining the economic and social indicators it had over 30 years ago. You know, I wish that wasn't true, but to speak frankly and objectively, that is the case. You're not yet at the heights that you previously were. But by building a strong base now, economically, in terms of governance, in terms of your education foundations across the board, then you will blow past your former height and keep going. That is, when I talk about the full revival of Somalia, that's what I'm talking about. Because why do I believe that's possible? Because I have seen the evidence in the ethnic Somali communities around the planet. How many different countries have the ethnic Somali communities prospered and done spectacularly well with the genius and energy, ingenuity, entrepreneurship that this community, this culture is known for. So if it can be done in Sydney, Australia, and it can be done in Fargo, I forget which Dakota that is, north or south, but and in the Nordic countries and all around the world, it can be done at home. And so that is why I'm expecting Somalia to take its rightful place as a leader in East Africa. Yeah.
I have about 4 questions, but I hear people want to ask questions. So I would only ask 2 of those 4 questions that I have and let other people ask questions so I don't take their time. I'm interested, Excellency, as you're aware of, China's engagement in Africa witnessed exponential growth in the last 20 years. And while the U.S. engagement in Africa flatlined, what are the reasons to that, and what can the U.S. do differently in the next decade or so to ensure that that it deepens the partnership with African countries?
Sure. Our relationship with China is complicated, and so let me explain some things about that. The Chinese and U.S. economies are very intertwined. China is a competitor, and people will say, that's because you are a world power and you want to prevent another world power from rising. We don't have a problem with another world power rising if it is a world power that wants to see the world managed in an open, transparent, fair manner. We don't want to see a closed system. We don't want to see a frankly dictatorial system. We want to keep it and make it more open than it already is. I mean, the composition of the UN Security Council, our president is on record saying that needs to be reformed. And I think a lot of Africans agree with that. So that's the kind of thing that we want to see, is greater advancement of the world system towards greater legitimacy, credibility, functionality.